Oh, wow. After the resignation of the former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, the Tories were holding their own in one of their strongholds, but they lose in two other constituencies. Because in a much anticipated by-election in Britain, the Conservative Tories have defended former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's constituency. According to the results announced on Friday, they won the Uxbridge and South Ruislip constituency by 13,965 votes, with the opposition Labour Party losing with 13,470 votes, so with a very narrow margin. In contrast, the Tories suffered a heavy defeat in the Somerton and Frome constituency. 10,179 votes they had, and the Liberal Democrats had 21,187. And Labour has won the Selby and Ainsty by-election, overturning a majority of 20,137 votes, the biggest it has ever overcome at a by-election. And the Tories have been in power in Britain for 13 years, but have lost support after various scandals and changes in leadership. In recent polls, they trail Labour by a wide margin. The by-election in a total of 3 constituencies, which were previously firmly in the hands of the Tories, was therefore an important test of mood for the Conservatives. The West London constituency of Uxbridge and South Ruislip has been a Conservative Tory stronghold of Johnson and current Prime Minister Rishi Sunak for decades. It was eagerly awaited to see whether opposition Labour Party candidate Danny Beales would win against Conservative Steve Tuckwell. The by-election in these 3 constituencies, which until now, as I said, have always been firmly in the hands of the Tories, was therefore seen as an important test of sentiment for the Conservatives. Johnson resigned as Prime Minister last July after a series of scandals after around 3 years and left office in September. However, he initially remained an elected MP for this constituency in West Greater London. A report in June concluded that Johnson had deliberately lied to Parliament about illegal lockdown parties at Downing Street during the coronavirus pandemic. He then resigned his mandate and thus escaped humiliating sanctions, but in doing so triggered the by-elections. In the other 2 Conservative constituencies, too, resignations had made new elections necessary. Nigel Adams and Selby and Ainsty had resigned in protest because Johnson had not included him in the list of upcoming honours. And David Warburton in Somerton and Frome resigned after allegations of sexual abuse and drug use. As I said, the Tories have been in power in Britain for 13 years, but have lost support after various scandals and changes in leadership. And Labour is quite ahead in the polls now. And British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's efforts to turn the tide have been hampered by persistently high inflation, mass strikes against the country's ailing healthcare system, and massive cost of living in the country. 2/3 of Britons polled have negative attitudes toward him. And with these strikes, polluted rivers and catastrophic healthcare, just 9 months after Rishi Sunak was appointed Prime Minister, he and his government are as unpopular with the British as the Tories were under John Major last in 1997. And there are many reasons for this, and one of them is Rishi Sunak himself. Many voters are angry, and the mood among the Tories is also pretty bad given the by-election in the 3 boroughs or constituencies. Many in the party are of the opinion that it would take a miracle for the Conservatives to defend even a single seat, but that they did, but they still lost too. Prime Minister Sunak has fallen further in the polls. Only 25% of Britons appreciate his work, 65% are dissatisfied, and that's according to a survey by YouGov. But things aren't looking that great for Labour leader Keir Starmer either. His poll numbers are better, but given the desolate state of the Conservatives, there's still a lot of room for improvement. For him, the elections were an important indicator of whether a change of government in the parliamentary elections in 24-25 is possible. And Starmer spreads little positive energy in the political debate. A concept like New Labour, with which Tony Blair won the elections in 1997 and which signalled a new beginning, a change, is not recognisable. Starmer wants to convey stability and often sounds like Sunak, as critics say. Reform and payment in the healthcare service is one example. Doctors have just announced that they are going on strike for higher wages, and Starmer is asked who should pay for this, and he replied, "If we were in government, I would absolutely focus on the economy growing." Well, Prime Minister Sunak would answer in a similar way. And just like the Conservatives, Starmer wants to implement a solid financial policy and is thus alienating parts of his party. And Starmer sounds confusingly similar to the Conservatives in many other areas. Brexit is not being questioned, although the latest polls show that more than 50% of Britons would vote for re-entry. And Starmer avoids this debate and doesn't want to be the one who tells many Britons that they voted wrong in 2016. But Labour would also have to deal with the problems caused by Brexit after success in the general elections. Subdued growth, excessive promises by Brexit supporters, for example in asylum policy. And the morale remains. At this point, for many, the difference between Labour and the Tories, which are characterised by lies and scandals, is hardly recognisable. A new beginning, a new start, according to many voters, looks differently. And that's probably the point why they weren't successful in the third constituency. It was close, it was a former Tory stronghold, but with the Tory party in such a devastating condition, that should have been a landslide for the opposition. But not like that. And if you want to know more about current politics in the UK or Brexit, the next video is right in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.